And, you know, speaking of people who are wrong about the see what I did there? About routinely wrong, and yet the press continues
still wants to listen to them.
Let's go and see what our heroic former president, George W. Bush, he's opened his mouth for the first time in a long time. So George W. Bush is very concerned that Joe Biden is withdrawing troops from Afghanistan. So he tells a German broadcaster, quote, "I think it is, because I think the consequences are going to be unbelievably bad and sad." And he speaks specifically about girls. He says, it just seems like they're going to be left behind to be slaughtered by those very brutal people, and it breaks my heart. And I have a lot to say about this, which is that if only George W. Bush had had the same broken heart about the thousands of American soldiers who were killed in Iraq because of his policies, and then the thousands more who were killed in Afghanistan because he kept them there for an indeterminate mission and then required multiple presidents to have to go in and clean his mess, perhaps we could have shown some compassion for those people and, you know, the civilians and many others who were killed in the ensuing violence and more. There is nothing about this pisses me off to the highest degree to watch these generals and these warmongers, and especially people like Bush, who got us in this mess in the first place, weaponize people's good hearts and empathy. Listen, it's a tragedy about what's happening in Afghanistan to Afghan women, but it's not our fault, and it's not our problem. We've spent over $100 million trying to protect Afghan girls. The Taliban is stronger today than they were when we invaded in 2001. Think about how much of a failure that is. And we have spent $100 billion trying to build up the native capacity of the Afghan National Security Forces, who, by their own admission, have problems with child sexual abuse within their ranks, which we were complicit in and tried to silence back in 2015. So, look, it's a messy situation. I don't know how else to say it. And if George W. Bush wants to resume, well, I guess legally he can. So if his brother wants to run on a position of going to go and protect Afghan girls to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars and, you know, American soldiers and lives, he is welcome to do so, and he'll get shot down by the American public. Like, the tone deafness on this stuff is just so absolutely, it's unbelievable that this man is even considered a authority in anything. And, you know, it's one of those terrible situations where, because he's affable and polite, everybody overlooks the fact Iraq was bad, guys. I mean, we're not supposed to just move on from these things. It was the worst foreign policy disaster in probably American history, in terms of we brought it upon ourselves, didn't even get slow walked into anything. And we look at how he has the gall to be like, oh, this is a disaster, and criticizing the current president on this. I mean, this is one place where I will defend Biden to the death in terms of, you know, in terms of
he's been right on this. He's been very clear about it, and he's ultimately been consistent, and kudos to him, and that is no easy feat.
No, it's not.
We've seen the way that the national security state will do anything to undermine you when it comes to winding down any of these conflicts. The only reason anyone should be listening to what George W. Bush has to say on foreign policy is to do the opposite, right? That's the only, like, what is this idiot who did everything wrong in a horrific and unconscionable way? What is he saying? Maybe we should probably do the opposite of whatever it is he is ultimately saying. But you're right, because not only because he's like affable and he's friends with Michelle Obama and Ellen DeGeneres and whatever, but he also got held up and lionized as like, well, even George W. Bush says that Trump is, but you know, like as the good Republican. I was like, wait,
Trump is great then.
Like, we don't have to rehab this guy's reputation in order to oppose Trump. You don't have to do that, guys. And yet that's exactly what's been done. So now he's in a position where we have to listen to his terrible ideas on Afghanistan. I love how now he's this like internationalist humanitarian caring about the women and girls of Afghanistan. Like, what about the hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians that are dead because of your war? What about them? You know, where was your humanitarian, like your big-hearted humanitarianism?
Sunni militias murdered all of these women in the streets of Iraq. I mean, all because of Bush. And actually, most of it happened under the Bush administration. And they had to send 1,000 more troops there in order to stop the terrorist militias that we are the ones who allowed to foment and foster in the first place. Go and ask people in Baghdad how much they remember Mr. Bush's care for a lot of their children who had their heads drilled with Sunni militias. Seriously, I mean, I could go on this stuff forever. But
well, and what's sad though is that now that it's Biden doing the withdrawal, you're starting to see now. Look, overwhelmingly, the public supports us getting out of Afghanistan, and that is a good thing to see. But you're starting to see in polling more of a partisan divide. You know, back when it was Trump who said he was going to get us out of Afghanistan, Republicans were all on board with it. Yes, we should end these wars. Let's get out of Afghanistan. Now that it's Biden who's actually getting it done, well, now the feelings are a little bit more mixed. So we can throw this tear sheet up on the screen from The Hill. This is a write-up of a Politico Morning Consult survey. Now, like I said, they found a majority of registered voters, 59%, support Biden's plan to withdraw the troops. That is good. In comparison, only 25% said they are opposed, 16% had no opinion. But again, if you drill down into the partisan makeup here, you have 76% of Democrats in support, you have 59% of independents in support, which is equal to like the overall numbers as well. Only 42% of Republicans, roughly an equal percentage, oppose the plan at 43%. So again, when it was Trump, all the Republicans were like, yes, get us out of Afghanistan. Now they're split basically 50-50. I'd also be curious to see how the Democratic numbers shifted.
Like when it was opposite.
I'm sure it was probably the same. They were when it was Trump who was going to withdraw. They're like, what about the women and the girls? Now that it's Biden that's doing it, they're all in for it. But you know, it's not surprising because of how sort of tribal and sectarian and partisan our politics are. But you would think on a core issue of war and peace, people could hold just like a consistent principle and not filter it through the lens of whichever like tribal team they more identify with. But even on this, tribalism seems to control.
Well, that's the culture war, isn't it? It's beautiful. My favorite graph of this, I think I played it on Rising, which was the Republicans who felt the economy was doing really well, and then on January 21st, the day Biden is inaugurated, boom!
Suddenly,
it was like 75%.
instantly.
Now it's 20%. Democrats, same thing. They're like, this is a disaster. The day Biden gets inaugurated, 70% approval rating. The economy didn't change, folks. Same economy. This is the same thing. It's a really sad thing, which is that it gets even great policies like this. Whenever it's touched by the culture war, things completely switch around. 100% of these people would have supported it if Trump did, and a lot of the Democrats were probably against it. But look, on a policy substance, I want to give as much credit as I possibly can to President Joe Biden. Let's put this up there from NPR. The top U.S. commander in Afghanistan has relinquished his post. According to the government, and we should check on this, they say that 95% of the withdrawal has already happened. The Afghan government itself is already preparing for the total withdrawal of U.S. forces. The Kabul embassy is really the last thing that's going to be there. Of course, are CIA contractors and all those other people going to be still running around the country? Almost absolutely. But to not have active duty combat soldiers patrolling the streets of Afghanistan, getting killed, stepping on landmines for nothing, that will be his, in my opinion, probably his greatest legacy for coming out, having the actual stones to do it. Mark Milley and the generals, they threw everything they had at Biden. He did what Obama could not. He did what Trump could not. Trump folded every single time that these people threw the mat at him. And, you know, that takes real courage in order to actually do this. Because, as you can see, the entire international machine is trying to keep him there. And he's, from what we can tell right now, he has not wavering course. Everybody out on August 31st.
Yeah, been completely adamant and consistent and said, look, we said we wanted to get bin Laden. We said we wanted to root al-Qaeda out of Afghanistan. We did that a long time ago. It is long past time for us to come home. And anyone who says otherwise, look, yes, it is a horrible situation to imagine what some of the people in Afghanistan are going to be going through. What's your plan? Yeah. What's your alternative? And that's the part that George W. Bush or any of these people who are leaking to the press, none of them have a plan that's other than endless war, endless resources, endless lives. And what have we got for it? As you said, Taliban now stronger than ever. After all of our investments, after all of our training, after all of that, stronger than ever. So show me a trajectory that doesn't end in a horrific place. And no one has ever had an answer for any of that. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it, you get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.